Have you ever wondered what happens when the very institutions designed to uphold justice are challenged, maybe from within?
Yeah.
When the people sworn to protect the rule of law suddenly find themselves defending it, not from, external threats, but from political interference, maybe coming from the highest levels of government.
It's a tough question.
It really gets at the bedrock of our democratic system, doesn't it?
It truly does. It forces us to confront the immense pressure individuals face when they're, holding the line against powerful forces, especially when those forces are coming from within their own ranks, right from the very top.
And that's exactly the kind of thing we're getting into today. You are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation powered by Google's NotebookLM for deeper, more dynamic book critique. We're looking at Geoffrey Berman's book, Holding the Line.
Geoffrey S. Berman. He's in a really unique position to give us this insight. Stanford law grad, served as the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, that's the SDNY, from 2018 to 2020. And what makes his account, particularly compelling is that Berman is a Republican. He was actually a Trump appointee. So his story carries this distinct credibility precisely because he was an insider who, in the end, resisted pressure from the administration he served.
That's a key point. It's not some outside critique. It's a view from the heart of the storm.
Yeah.
And the book's core argument, it's the thesis, it's pretty clear. Prosecutorial independence isn't just a nice ideal.
No.
It's the absolute cornerstone of American justice. Think of it like the bedrock of a skyscraper. If it cracks, the whole building of justice is at risk. Berman argues federal prosecutors have to operate without fear or favor, basing decisions just on the law and the evidence. Doesn't matter who's involved.
And he contends that during his time there, the Trump Justice Department, especially under Attorney General William Barr, systematically corrupted this independence. He calls it brazen political interference.
Wow.
He sees this as a direct threat to the constitutional separation of powers, the thing our entire system relies on.
And this isn't just some dry legal text, right?
Not at all. It's a political memoir, but it's also got this institutional analysis woven in. Berman's personal story mixed with these bigger constitutional arguments about, what it takes to maintain democratic norms.
And the timing, the context is crucial here.
Absolutely. The book covers 2018 to 2020, a period marked by really high-profile investigations into Trump's associates, Russian election interference, and what Berman himself calls one of the most tumultuous 2.5-year stretches in the SDNY's, long history.
So our mission today is really to unpack Berman's account, look at his claims, the evidence he presents, and think about the broader implications for justice and, governance.
Okay, let's get into it.
Okay, so let's unpack this. The core of Berman's book really lies in these moments where he felt the line was being crossed. What were some of those key instances of political pressure he talks about from inside the Justice Department during that time?
Well, Berman details several pretty significant instances. He claims the Justice Department pressured the SDNY to prosecute Trump critics. He gives John Kerry under the Logan Act as a prime example. He also states that Maine Justice, that's the central DOJ office back in D.C., tried to protect Trump by explicitly trying to remove references to Individual 1 from Michael Cohen's plea documents.
Individual 1, which, everyone understood that to mean then, President Trump. That's a really serious accusation of direct interference.
It is, and there's more. Berman alleges the department was essentially keeping score.
Keeping score.
Yeah, tracking investigations on Democrats versus Republicans and actively pressing his office to even things out.
Wow, politically balance the prosecution.
That's the allegation. And maybe most strikingly, he claims Barr tried to halt or weaken cases involving Trump allies while, at the same time, pushing to accelerate cases against opponents.
Imagine the pressure. Being told to adjust your decisions based on political sides.
Exactly.
So he's not just making vague claims here. He's providing specific examples, directives, attempts to manipulate investigations. What kind of evidence does he offer in the book to back this all up?
His evidence is primarily from detailed firsthand accounts, meetings he was in, phone calls he took, directives he says he received from DOJ leadership.
Okay. His word, his perspective.
Right. But what's interesting here is that Berman's claims, they seem to align with patterns of Barr's interference in other high-profile cases that were documented publicly. Cases involving Roger Stone and Michael Flynn.
Ah, Okay, so there's some external corroboration, or at least parallel patterns.
Exactly. That historical parallel, it suddenly lends significant credibility to Berman's accusations.
And the SDNY itself, his office, they weren't just rolling over, right? He talks about pushing back. That must have been incredibly challenging.
Absolutely. The book really highlights the SDNY's successful resistance in several big cases. Think Jeffrey Epstein, Michael Cohen. It shows the office maintained its prosecutorial integrity despite what Berman describes as, intense interference.
And then it all came to a head, didn't it?
Yeah. Then, of course, there's the very public confrontation Berman had with Barr over his resignation, which ultimately led to Berman's firing.
Right.
Those events, they serve as pretty concrete evidence of his resistance and, well, just how high the stakes were for defending that prosecutorial independence.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about Berman's perspective itself. Every author brings their own lens, right? It shapes the narrative.
Yeah.
What do you see as the strengths of his viewpoint in this book? And maybe what caveats should we as listeners keep in mind?
Okay, so in terms of knowledge and understanding, the book is really solid on factual grounding. Berman's direct experience, his access to internal communications, it gives you reliable insights into SDNY operations during his tenure.
Yeah, he was there.
Exactly. Case outcomes, legal procedures, documented DOJ actions, he's got that covered. And he also shows a pretty sophisticated grasp of how prosecutorial independence fits into our constitutional structure. He gets the legal and political system.
So he definitely knows the facts, understands the system.
Yeah.
But what about his opinions, his comparative claims? That's where things can get a bit more, let's say, subjective.
Precisely, yeah. While his direct experience is invaluable, his judgments about why the Justice Department did certain things, especially Barr's intentions, sometimes they rely more on inference, on his interpretation, rather than, smoking gun documents for every single claim.
Okay, that makes sense.
And also his characterization of certain pressures as unprecedented. That involves comparing history, right?
Right.
And that might exceed the evidence he has direct access to. I mean, the events he describes were certainly remarkable, maybe even shocking, but calling them truly unprecedented across all of history, that's a really high bar for any one person to definitively clear.
Fair enough. And what about the deeper wisdom? Beyond just the facts and opinions, what does the book offer there?
Well, his proposals for protecting prosecutorial independence, they do show some practical wisdom about institutional design, especially his emphasis on just calling them as they see them on the law and the facts.
Stick to the law.
Right. That reflects a sound judgment about prosecutorial ethics-based decisions on evidence, not politics. But it's also worth noting some of his recommendations might oversimplify what are actually pretty complex constitutional relationships. That's a key caveat to keep in mind.
Okay, let's try to dig into the ethical and constitutional dimensions now. We often use this idea of reciprocity analysis, basically applying the golden rule, treat others like you want to be treated, focusing on universal human needs. How does Berman's stance stack up when we look at it through that lens?
Applying the golden rule, which asks, what serves everyone's basic needs for justice and security, Berman's stance generally lines up pretty well. His resistance to political interference, it protects the fundamental right we all have to impartial law enforcement.
Yeah, you want justice to be fair for you, so it needs to be fair for everyone.
Exactly. But some specific applications he described show some interesting ethical tensions.
Like the Hawk Bank case. I remember that was a really complicated one.
Exactly. Berman's insistence on prosecuting the Turkish bank, Hawk Bank, even though there were foreign policy complications swirling around it, it really illustrates the complexity here.
How so?
Well, while he correctly prioritized the legal merits over, say, political expediency or diplomatic convenience, the case raises legitimate questions about how you balance prosecutorial independence with national security concerns. In that scenario, Berman's position protected, you could say, ordinary citizens from potential prosecutorial abuse based on politics. But it might have disadvantaged political actors who maybe sought favorable treatment for diplomatic reasons.
So under that golden rule analysis,
that asymmetry is generally seen as justifiable because equal treatment under the law serves those universal needs for justice and security, even if it creates some diplomatic ripples or political headaches.
Okay, connecting this to the bigger picture then. How does Berman's book align with those foundational aims laid out in the preamble to the U.S. Constitution? Those big goals for the nation.
Right. Well, the book strongly serves to establish justice and secure the blessings of liberty. That seems clear. By opposing political interference and defending those procedural protections, it's right in line with those aims.
Makes sense.
For ensure domestic tranquility, the results are maybe a bit mixed. On one hand, protecting the rule of law definitely promotes stability long term. But Berman's confrontational approach towards the DOJ hierarchy, you could argue, might also increase institutional conflict, at least in the short term.
Okay, what about the other aims in the preamble?
It seems to address provide for the common defense somewhat inadequately. It doesn't fully resolve those tensions between prosecutorial independence and legitimate national security considerations, like we just talked about with Hawkbank. It does serve to promote the general welfare by protecting institutions that ultimately benefit all citizens. Though you could argue some of his proposals might benefit prosecutors specifically, maybe more than the broader public in some ways.
So overall,
We gave it a pretty strong score, a 7 out of 10 for aligning with the preamble's aims, mostly for its strong service to justice and liberty, but with maybe less attention paid to national security coordination and domestic tranquility in the immediate term.
this is the kind of detail we really enjoy digging into for you. The layers of argument, the underlying assumptions. It takes real thought to untangle these issues.
It really does.
And actually, this kind of detailed thinking is exactly why we created Mindful Moments. That's our YouTube channel. It offers AI book analysis, summaries, critiques, all designed to inspire reflection and, well, rational thought. It's about going beyond just the headlines and truly understanding the layers involved.
Yeah, getting deeper into the why behind the what.
Exactly. Now let's get back to the logical analysis of holding the line. Does Berman's core argument actually hold water from a purely logical standpoint? Is it sound?
Berman's central argument, it follows a pretty sound logical structure, basically. Political interference in prosecution undermines the rule of law.
Okay.
And the rule of law is essential for democratic governance.
Right.
Therefore, political interference inherently threatens democracy. Logically, that hangs together. It's a valid argument for him.
But are there any questionable premises? Any assumptions baked into his argument that maybe we should look at skeptically?
Yes, I think there are. The book seems to operate on the assumption that pretty much any coordination between Main Justice and the U.S. Attorney offices constitutes improper interference.
Ah, okay. So any direction is bad direction.
That seems to be the implication sometimes, and that premise arguably oversimplifies what are often legitimate, even necessary, supervisory relationships within the executive branch hierarchy.
Right. Not all coordination is sinister interference. Some is just how the department runs nationwide.
Exactly. Some of it is simply necessary for the Department of Justice to function as a single, unified entity across the whole country.
Okay. And when we look at how he builds his case, the way he argues, can we spot any common logical fallacies, things that might subtly skew the argument?
Yeah, we can identify a few potential ones. There seems to be what logicians call a false dichotomy at play sometimes. Meaning, he sometimes presents prosecutorial decisions as if they have to be either purely legal or purely political. It kind of ignores the possibility that there can be legitimate policy considerations, things like resource allocation or national security concerns we mentioned that fall somewhere in between. They're not strictly law, but they're not necessarily improper politics either.
Okay, that black and white thinking.
Right. He also seems to employ hasty generalization at times, using specific examples from the Trump administration, which were significant, no doubt, to make really broad, sweeping claims about prosecutorial independence without maybe enough historical comparison.
Like, were similar pressures never felt in other administrations, even if they were maybe less overt or less intense?
Exactly. The book doesn't fully explore that comparative angle. And finally, there's maybe an element of appeal to authority.
How so?
Relying heavily on the SDNY's strong reputation, which is well-deserved, but without always fully defending why a local office like SDNY should always override national DOJ policies, even in areas where the Attorney General constitutionally has a broader national view or responsibility.
Okay, so relying on the reputation without fully making the case for autonomy in every instance.
Sort of, yeah.
So what does all this analysis mean for the long-term consequences? If we think about Berman's proposals, particularly regarding the practical wisdom or maybe lack thereof.
Well, Berman's vision, this idea of enhanced prosecutorial independence, it could definitely strengthen democratic institutions. How? By reducing the potential for political manipulation of law enforcement. That's the upside.
But there's a potential downside.
Yeah, the risk is that an extreme implementation of his ideas might actually fragment law enforcement. It could make it harder to coordinate national efforts against, say, terrorism, or complex financial crime. And it could potentially reduce democratic accountability if these local offices become too insulated, too independent from any oversight.
It's a balance.
There really is a delicate balance to strike. The book also doesn't really get into the economic implications much, like how should prosecutorial resources be divvied up if local offices operate with minimal central coordination? Who decides those priorities?
Good point. But stepping back from the proposals, just looking at his actions, his commitment to justice and integrity really seems to shine through, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You really get a sense of Berman's admirable commitment to justice, to integrity. He models a kind of virtue in public service. His willingness to sacrifice his career advancement for principle that reflects real moral courage. It's genuinely worthy of emulation. However, from a purely prudential standpoint, meaning looking at the practical wisdom, the foresight of his proposals, some of them might lack that foresight.
Go on.
They potentially fail to anticipate how bad actors, maybe in the future, could exploit excessive prosecutorial independence for their own ends. Or how local prosecutors, even with good intentions, might pursue their own political agendas while claiming this expanded independence shields them from scrutiny.
The independence could be used as a shield for other motives.
It's a possibility. It's a complex landscape, always unintended consequences to consider with major institutional changes.
So let's try to bring it all together then. What's our balanced conclusion on Geoffrey Berman's Holding the Line? What are the key takeaways?
Okay, the book's strengths are pretty significant. It's a credible firsthand account. It provides valuable documentation from his perspective of Trump-era DOJ politicization.
Crucial insider view.
Right. And Berman's actual defense of prosecutorial independence, his actions, they demonstrate remarkable moral courage and loyalty to the institution, to the SDNY. And the book absolutely raises crucial questions about executive power, judicial independence in our system. Plus, it offers concrete recommendations for protecting that independence, even suggesting potential legislative fixes.
But as we've discussed, it's not without its weaknesses.
Correct. We identified what seems like an oversimplified concept of independence at times, treating almost any DOJ coordination as improper interference, maybe ignoring legitimate supervisory needs within a unified department.
Okay.
There's also insufficient historical context, making claims about unprecedented interference without a really deep comparative analysis across different administrations. It also presents a perspective primarily from a Republican prosecutor, which is valuable, as we said, but it may not fully represent the diverse experiences across the broader DOJ. Different people might have seen things differently. And finally, the solutions proposed, while interesting, seem somewhat incomplete. They don't fully address how you'd prevent potential abuse by independent prosecutors themselves if they gain even more autonomy.
This analysis of the book, it was informed by a systematic framework we use for comprehensive critique. It draws on established principles of analytical rigor and evaluative depth, just to ensure we give a thorough and precise examination of the material presented.
Right.
And all this leaves us with some really critical, unresolved questions. Questions for you, our listener, to think about. How can prosecutorial independence be balanced effectively with democratic accountability? It's a tough one.
Yeah.
What robust mechanisms should exist for addressing prosecutor misconduct if their independence is expanded? How do you hold them accountable? How should crucial national security considerations interact with local prosecutorial independence? That Hawk Bank example really highlights the tension.
It does.
And maybe the most provocative question. Could Berman's proposed reforms, even with the best intentions, actually be exploited by future administrations for partisan purposes? Could they backfire?
It's a lot to chew on. For those seeking deeper reflection on justice and institutional integrity, remember to check out Mindful Moments on our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And explore our podcasts for more in-depth analyses like this one.
Definitely. Click the link on screen for the in-depth book analysis. Subscribe, share, purchase via link, and think rationally.